Dana?
And let's bring in retired General Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst. And we know, listening to you, that that is exactly what Iran does over and over again. Can I just play one more thing from President Trump from you and for you, and then get your take on how this is going? Watch.
So they asked us, Iran specifically, but the other three said we really, I asked Saudi Arabia, the king, I said, the crown prince, I said, what would you rather do? Would you rather have us do this or not? They said, we would much prefer a deal as opposed to an attack, because you don't know where these attacks lead. I mean, will they be flooded with people pouring into their country and disaster? A lot of bad things can happen.
All of that taken into account, where do you think the president is today, and where do we end up in a few days from now?
Yeah, well, it's certainly challenging to unpack some of this, given all the players involved. And obviously, the president was on the cusp of going back into major combat operations, so our audience understands that meant that Israel was going to participate. The targets had expanded quite a bit beyond epic fury for a couple of reasons. One, we had considerably more intelligence over the last 4 months since the ceasefire on April the 7th. And two, it was a recognition that we had to take down their energy and economic targets, which brought into a different array of targets to crush this regime once and for all. So where are we now? Well, let's start with President Trump himself. I mean, as noted here, the Iranians have told him something privately that obviously hasn't been disclosed publicly in terms of making a deal. And publicly, they're saying quite something else. They're actually saying there are no negotiations planned for today, which was the day the president said they were going to start. But I'm making the assumption, certainly, that the president has heard something that's different that motivated him to stand down that military attack. And the two issues clearly on the table are the Straits of Hormuz and also a nuclear enterprise. And the Straits of Hormuz, what we're talking about is going back to international navigation waterways prior to the war beginning on February 28th. We're not talking about Oman maintains some level of control and Iran maintains some level of control. That is not what the deal will consist of. The administration's position is go back to where it was prior to February the 28th, recognition of it being international waterways. Nobody has control of it, and nobody has the right to interfere with it. And I think if you take a look at the president in terms of what is on his mind, you have to recognize on April the 7th, he went to a ceasefire. After 38 days of war, the plan was to finish on the 52nd day. It may have gone a day or two longer, a day or two shorter. But about 14 days later, end of military operations. So we went to a ceasefire. And the reason was the Straits of Hormuz. Why? Because the Iranians had took control of it on March the 2nd. And the president's priorities shifted. And he talked about it publicly, from the military objectives to economic objectives. What are we talking about here? Oil and gas prices. Also stated clearly political objectives, the impact of the midterm elections. 2 months later, a deal was struck between the two presidents over the seminal point, the Straits of Hormuz. But we come to find out days later that Iran was not going to comply with that. And they violated it significantly, and as a result, we've had attacks back and forth for a number of weeks, bringing us to the decision to go to major combat operations. But it is very revealing, the fact that Iran had no intention to comply with the deal they had signed. We always said that Iran is going to lie and cheat to get a deal, and now they actually did not comply with the deal that they signed. And I think that has got to be in the background here. Certainly the Trump administration is very much aware of it. A couple other things to unpack here. Number one is the mediators. It is well known in the Middle East region by our intelligence services, by all the players, that the Pakistanis and the Qataris are compromised because they favor Iran at the expense of the United States. This is historical. This is not new. And yet they're the mediators. So their influence here, I think, has played a part in misleading the United States in terms of Iran's real intentions. The second thing are our allies and partners, led by Saudi Arabia. let us point out and remind the audience here that when we were going to open the Straits of Hormuz forcibly, Saudi denied us the use of our air base and denied us the use of their airspace, and also told the president and discouraged him from doing it because they thought the operation would fail. Of course, they knew nothing about the details of that operation, nor are they qualified to make that kind of an assumption. And what the Saudis are doing here is, for the fourth time, they have influenced the president. One is on the Straits of Hormuz. Two other times, it's well known that he was close to going back to major combat operations, and they talked him, as well as other allies in the region, down from doing that, and let's try to make a deal. That is what is going on here. So what's going on with the Saudis? The fact of the matter is, the Saudis are not willing to sacrifice to rid the Middle East region of Iran's aggression. That is the absolute fact that we're seeing playing out here. What do I mean by sacrifice? Casualties and the damage to some of their oil reserves. That's the reality that's taking place here. They're willing for us to make that sacrifice, for sure. They're willing for Israel to make that sacrifice, for sure. That's despite the fact that they've been under a nuclear and security umbrella since World War II, despite the fact that the United States led a coalition to stop Saddam Hussein from taking Saudi oil fields after they took the Kuwaiti oil fields, and we liberated them. Despite the fact that after the Saudi government killed Khashoggi, the Trump administration certainly wire-brushed them for that, but still maintain a relationship with this kingdom. And I think this is shameful that they lack the spine to stand up for their people and for the region here and support the president on what is taking place. And the reality is, going forward here, it's going to come down to Iran and the United States. Is Iran really ready to make a deal of substance here and carry it through? My gut feel here is no. They are not going to give up the Straits of Hormuz. They think it's a strategic asset. They'll try to waffle this any way that they can so that they maintain some level of control over it, and it will not be satisfactory to the Trump administration, much less the nuclear enterprise as well, which I think is down the road and as difficult as the Straits of Hormuz happening. The president is not going to make a bad deal here. And also, I think he learned a few things as a result of that memorandum of understanding, which was poorly crafted and led to certainly a lot of misunderstandings.
General Jack Keane, thank you. It is Monday, and we get underway here for the week, and we'll be in touch with you for sure. Thank you. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.